Hello and welcome to English II. I'm your online teacher, Miss Abear. We have been working on a unit about rhetoric and how authors use rhetoric to advance their claim and their purpose. And so today we are on lesson 5, and it is paragraphs 10 and 11 for Martin Luther King's letter from Birmingham Jail. As a reminder, this is a Engaged New York unit, and you will be working on an end of the unit task where you will rely on your reading and analysis of the letter from Birmingham Jail to write a well-developed response to the prompt, analyze how King develops and refines his claims to advance his purpose. Throughout this unit so far, we have been reading the letter, we have been answering questions, and those questions are leading us to being able to write a well-developed response. Right now, we have bits and pieces, but we haven't developed those thoughts as well as we can. So we're going to continue to develop those thoughts so that we can write an effective essay. As always, we are going to start with our lesson agenda. You will see we will go to homework accountability after we finish with our agenda. We will do a masterful reading of paragraphs 10 and 11. We will have some reading and discussion times. And of course, we're going to write. We're going to do a quick write. And then I will give you a little bit of homework during our closing. You can see the standards as well as our text on your screen in front of you. So if you have any questions, this screen should tell you everything that we're going to do today, as well as the text that we are reading. So let's dig right in. So last night you guys were supposed to reread Martin Luther King's letter, just paragraph 9, and you were going to note every time he used the word tension, and then to look at the ways in which that word is used. So I want you to turn and talk with a partner and answer these questions and discuss those really quickly, and then we'll come back and talk about those. So how many times does King use the word tension in paragraph 9? 7 times. Do you think that's a coincidence? There is a little verse in the Bible that talks about doing something or asking the question if you say or if you do something 7 times, and I will let you go back and read that if you don't know anything about it, but you should look into that. Now I will also tell you that this is what we call an allusion, A-L-L-U-S-I-O-N. It alludes to a verse in the Bible, and one of our standards does require that you understand or have some basic understanding of biblical references. And this 7 times, that's not a coincidence that he uses the word tension 7 times. Well, let's also look at the way that the word is being used in paragraph 9. So he changes the word from something negative or shocking to something positive. He also shows the difference between violent tension and creative tension. And then he compares the tension required for society to improve to Socrates' belief that mental tension was essential to access truth. So you see a lot of allusions in paragraph 9, and you should have recorded those on your rhetorical tracking tool. And if you haven't, make sure that you do that. All right? Now we are going to listen to a masterful reading from King's speech. Before we do, I need you to make sure that you get your handout and you have it in front of you. So before you start this particular reading, I want you to notice on your copy that the first half of paragraph 10 is in red. And if you remember correctly, or if you look back to the first page of your text, you will see that red means that is a part of the letter that is not in his masterful reading. It's not in the place where Dr. King reads his letter. So your teacher in the classroom will either read that out loud to you, or you will read it to yourself. And then you will pick up at 11:19 and you will read through, or you will listen through paragraph 11 that will take you to 16:31. So have your letter out so you can annotate as you listen. I'm going to give you a minute so you can do that now. I hope you guys enjoyed that as much as I did. I love hearing Dr. King read his own letter. I just think it's so powerful to hear his voice reading his letter. So we're going to move forward to our reading and discussion. And again, I want to draw your attention, or the teacher in your classroom's attention, back to the packet of materials that is linked in the YouTube description, because every student in the classroom needs this argument delineation tool, and you're going to use it throughout the lesson. This is what it looks like. You see it on the board in front of you. And so you are going to use that throughout today's lesson so that you can trace his argument and line it out. You can look at the evidence and the reasoning and how that evidence is used and what that reasoning means, right? So you kind of make those explanations. This particular tool will help you when you get ready to write your essay, so that you can take that argument and you can break it apart. When you break something apart and you make meaning out of it, that is analysis. And this particular tool will help you with the analysis. So now we're going to move forward, and you are going to get into either a small group or with a partner. That is going to be at the discretion of the teacher in your classroom. And you're going to reread paragraph 10 and answer the questions on your board. I heard some great conversations happening in your classrooms. We are going to look at the answers to a couple of these so that you can track that information both on that tracker, that delineation tool, as well as is there any rhetoric in here? Are we using any words or phrases that we need to make note of? And so let's look at the answers to some of these questions. All right, follow along with me. How do the first three sentences of paragraph 10 impact your understanding of King's purpose? King's purpose in this paragraph is to explain why he and his associates' actions are not untimely and why they cannot wait for the new administration to act. You should have written that down. If you didn't, you want to revise your response to make sure. Again, you want to write incomplete sentences. All right, let's look at the next question. How does King's description of Mr. Boutwell as a segregationist influence your understanding of the phrase status quo? Because segregation exists in the context of this letter, the status quo must mean the current state of affairs or the way things are. All right, let's look at the next question on our board. What does King mean by bring the millennium to Birmingham? What is the impact of the word millennium? King means desegregating Birmingham. By using the word millennium, King implies that desegregation is long overdue. His use of the word millennium implies that supporters of segregation are living in the dark ages, like people did 1,000 years ago. And that, again, remember, we're going to put that came from paragraph 10. All right, let's look at the next question. Given that King's purpose and his word choices, what can you infer is his central claim in paragraph 10? King's central claim is that African Americans cannot wait for their civil rights and must prod the white leaders in order to gain their rights. Okay, you should have those responses written down and at least revised some of your answers, written some additional things down, written some additional notes. Now I want you to go to your delineation tool, and you can see on the board behind me, I want you to put out for a text just paragraphs 10 and 11. And then I want you to write what his central claim is, because we identified that during our last questions. So the central claim is African Americans cannot wait to secure their civil rights and must immediately engage in determined legal and nonviolent pressure. Go ahead and put that on your form. And then we are going to continue to work through paragraph 10. Here are some additional questions for you to work through. Now, again, you can go back to the partner or group that you were with, or you can do another partner, whatever the teacher in your classroom decides, but you are to answer these questions. Great job. Now let's look at the answers to some of these questions and how you will plug that information into the tool that you're working to delineate his argument. All right, so the first question is, what makes history a long, tragic story? What is the impact of King's use of the word tragic in this sentence? History shows us that people in power usually do not share or give up any of their power without conflict or war. King's use of the word tragic refers to the conflicts in history, shows his regret that negotiation was ineffective in Birmingham and that direct action or direct acts became necessary. All right? The next question, or the next thing that we're going to go over, is you were to identify King's supporting claim in paragraph 10 and the evidence that he uses to support that claim, and then looking at how the evidence connects to the claim. All three of those help delineate the argument. King's supporting claim here is, my friends, I must say to you that we have not made a single gain in civil rights without determined legal and non-violent pressure. His evidence is the long, tragic story of history, and it connects to his claim by showing that privileged people are not likely to give up their privileges without some kind of conflict. All right, the last question that we're going to look at before we move on to another set of questions is what reasoning does King use to enhance this supporting claim? And then how does the reasoning support his claim in paragraph 10? And you can see that he quotes Reinhold Niebuhr, who believed that groups are more immoral than individuals. So when groups get together, they are not as moral as the individual in that group. And I hope that you can understand that. So most of the time you have this crowd theory is what they call it. And I'm not exactly sure if that's the right word, but people are more likely to do something outside of their moral character when they're with a group. Typically, people have their own individual moral beliefs, but they will act outside of those when they're with a group of people who don't share those beliefs. All right, let's look at two more questions and the responses. So, what evidence does King provide to explain why he believes that King and the clergymen will be sadly mistaken if they expect Mr. Boutwell to bring the millennium to Birmingham? Mr. Boutwell is a segregationist who is dedicated to the task of maintaining the status quo, meaning that he has no inner initiative to repeal segregation, which makes him unlikely to take action on behalf of African Americans. The African Americans in Birmingham have not made any advances in civil rights without determined legal and nonviolent pressure. So they cannot expect Mr. Boutwell to change on his own. And then how does this evidence support his King's central claim? It shows that Mr. Boutwell cannot be expected to desegregate Birmingham without pressure, and why African Americans cannot expect whites to change, which means they must engage in nonviolent action now. There is no waiting. So if you think back to the beginning of the letter where he's addressing the clergymen who say, just wait, it's coming. They can't wait any longer. They've waited and they've waited, and they're done waiting because nothing is changing. So make sure, you remember we talked about those annotation tools and how you draw arrows connecting ideas? This is a good one to go back and show that idea where the clergymen were asking for African Americans to wait, to just put it off a little bit longer, that change is coming. But change isn't coming. If it hasn't come yet, it's not going to come. All right, now I want you to take your responses to these answers, and I want you either, you know what, if the teacher in your classroom allows you to work with a partner, work with a partner. But I want you to put that supporting claim, the evidence, and your reasoning, and answer the questions on your argument delineation tool for paragraph 10. Good job, okay? So the teacher in your classroom will have access to one of these tools that's a model so that they can check your work and make sure that you're on the right track. All right, so now we are going to move forward to paragraph 11, and you are going to work again with a small group or a partner, and you're going to answer the questions on your board. All right, now let's look at a couple of these questions and how we would answer them. All right, so the first question was, how does King's supporting claim that freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor, it must be demanded by the oppressed, develop the central claim that he makes in paragraph 10? And if the answers, one of the best answers I heard was, it develops his central claim for the need of urgent and direct action by African Americans to secure their civil rights. How does King use figurative language to describe the frustration of being asked to wait? He uses metaphor to compare waiting to a sedative that temporarily eases discomfort but causes birth defects. And then how does the use of figurative language further King's central claim? The metaphor furthers his central claim by explaining why African Americans feel that wait has almost always meant never in regards to their equality and the pain such waiting causes them or has been causing them. So let's move forward and let's look at a couple of more answers or questions and answers before we go to our next set of questions. All right, how does King's statement, I guess it is easy for those who have never felt the stinging darts of segregation to say wait, develop the supporting claim at the beginning of paragraph 11? And you can see that it develops that supporting claim by implying another reason why the privileged group of whites do not understand the urgency for African Americans in securing their civil rights, and so they are even less likely to voluntarily give up their privilege. All right, I want somebody in your classroom to read the question and answer that's next. Great job. Thank you for leading that one. Now let's look at the next question. What is the effect of King's use on the word you in paragraph 11? How does this effect develop your understanding of King's purpose in paragraph 11? And if you look at the best answer, it's the word you makes the reader feel as if the stinging darts of segregation are happening to him or her. It develops King's purpose by making the reader feel what African Americans feel, to understand their pain as human beings. Now, I want you to think about that now, and I want you to think back to who this letter is written to. So when he uses the word you here, he's not talking about you and I. He is talking about the clergyman. He is asking the clergymen to put themselves, it's almost like he's pointing a finger at them and saying, you have not endured these stinging darts that I have endured, right? He is pointing the finger at those clergymen. And that is pretty strong when it comes to writing a letter like this. So he does a really good job of making them internalize what the African Americans have been dealing with when it comes to civil rights. Now, I want you to think about the responses to these questions before we move to the last set of questions and responses for this section. And I want you to think about how you will take this figurative language and use it on your rhetorical impact tracking tool, because you need to be keeping up with that as well. This figurative language should be on that tracking tool. Remember, I told you sometimes I'm going to remind you and sometimes I'm not. I'm reminding you right now. So you do it as you need to, but I'm not going to be able to remind you every single time. You just need to know that anytime we're looking at figurative language, rhetorical questions, any of those things, that tracking tool, you need to be keeping up with that information. All right, so let's look at our last set of questions before we move on to our quick write. How does the evidence that King provides in paragraph 11 develop his central claim? The evidence develops King's central claim by showing the injustices imposed upon African Americans to explain why they need to take immediate action to gain equal standing in American society. Okay? The next question is looking at for vocabulary. It's asking you what words could replace legitimate in paragraph 11. And so just looking at the context of that particular paragraph in that sentence, legitimate could be replaced with reasonable or justified. So that's one of those vocabulary questions that you may encounter on your end of the unit or end of year assessment. All right, let's look at the last question before we move on to our quick write. Identify King's reasoning in paragraph 11. How does King's reasoning in paragraph 11 support his central claim in paragraph 10? And you can see that King's reasoning is that it is easy for whites to say wait because they do not experience the stinging darts of segregation that gives African Americans legitimate and unavoidable impatience for their civil rights. King's reasoning supports his central claim by demonstrating why it is easy for whites to say wait and why African Americans are impatient by providing specific emotional details about the injustices suffered by African Americans every single day in Birmingham and really across the United States at this point. Okay, so go back and if you need to do that now or you need to do it later, you want to go back to your argument delineation tool and you need to trace that argument back and write all of those supporting details. I hope that you've been keeping up with that today because that is going to be an essential tool when you get ready to write out your essay and some of these other pieces and parts. All right, so let's look at what our quick write is going to be for today. Delineate the argument. Oh, isn't that the tool I just told you you need to be working on? Delineate the argument and specific claims in paragraphs 10 and 11. Assess whether King's evidence is relevant and sufficient. Go back to your annotations and other tools to find that evidence. Good job. I know your writings and your quick write are going to be really good for you to help you understand the processes of getting to that end of the unit task. All right, so let's look at your homework for this evening. In your teacher's packet of materials that's linked, you will see the Central Ideas Tracking Tool, and you should get a copy of that. And so you're going to take your letter, and you're going to take that Central Ideas Tracking Tool, and you're going to track where and what central ideas emerge in the text. You're going to reread paragraphs 1 through 11, all 11 paragraphs that we've read so far. You're going to track all of those central ideas and how they emerge in that text. I also want you to research the poet Ahmad Shamlou and the context in which he lived. I want you to choose 3 facts about Shamlou and explain how these facts might contribute to his perspective as a writer. Now, you should know when we go back to the first lesson of this unit, I talked about we're going to do some poetry and there's some other things that we're going to do. So you should already know that Shamlou is a poet and he probably has written something about segregation, or he's written something about human rights. Those are some of the big ideas that we're looking at in this particular module. And so you already know a little bit, but I want you to do a little bit of research and come back tomorrow and be ready to talk about all of these things because it's a lot. All right? Until next time, happy learning.